Welcome to another episode of Neil Wolf News. I'm your host, Neil Wolf. Have you ever had a serious injury that altered the course of your life? And even though it didn't take long to heal physically from the injury, that you knew somehow something was different and that perhaps your priorities had shifted? And upon further reflection, you realize that this injury was important for you to go through and to learn and to heal in order to become who you are today? In this episode, I'm going to tell the story about the time when I was a senior in high school and I was with some friends, snowmobiling and having a good time, and my night ended with a trip to the emergency room with a serious head injury. So let's get right into this. So this story takes place about 2 weeks before Christmas during my senior year in high school back in 1995. And I can recall that a friend and I had gone down to the Twin Cities to go Christmas shopping that day. And when we got home, we decided that we wanted to call up some friends and invite them over to snowmobile in my friend's yard. So our friends got there, and we decided that we would pull each other around the yard behind the snowmobile, and that we were going to just hold on to the bar right behind the track, even though usually we would pull with sleds, but we didn't have a sled that night, so we thought just pulling around the yard that we could just pull ourselves on our backs and have fun that way. And so my friend was driving the snowmobile while we were all taking turns dragging behind. And can recall on one of my turns, we were going around and around, and we got up by the top of the yard by the house, and I can remember having this thought that I should let go, that I was up by the house and it'd be a good time to let go. But then I thought again, and I thought, nah, I can be tough and that I can go another round and then I'll let go when we get back around. And it was on that last trip around that my friend took a wider turn and went across the driveway, and he ran over a log that was in the snow that he didn't see, and he pulled me head first into the log. I stopped immediately when I hit the log, and I can still recall the thoughts that I had in those moments. That I knew I had hit something hard, and that I knew that I could open my eyes, and that I was still here, so that I knew I was still alive. But then I also knew that my neck had crunched really bad, and so that I started to wiggle my fingers and my toes and could realize that I could still move. So I picked myself up off the ground, and then that's when I looked down. And when I looked down, all the blood had fallen off the top of my head, and I could realize that this was a serious injury. And by this time, my friend was able to get the snowmobile stopped, and my other friends had come down to see if I was okay. And I had just remember not really knowing what to say. I was just trying to say, I think I have to go to the hospital. I knew I was bleeding really bad. And then my friend's mom was a nurse, so they thought that we should go in and have her check on me to see if I was okay. And she said that, head injuries bleed a lot. So once she got me in and she got me under the sink and she could see that my scalp was split wide open, it was like a 8 to 10 inch cut in my scalp and I was bleeding really bad, that she said that I better get to the hospital. And I'm surprised that I stayed conscious for this whole thing. I didn't get knocked out when the injury happened, and I can still remember the whole ride to the hospital, and I was bleeding all over the truck. And we got to the emergency room, and I got in, and I can remember it didn't take long that they had called my parents and told them what happened. So my dad had met us there pretty shortly after, and he was able to wait in the emergency room with me. And I can recall that they had to put clamps on my scalp to hold my scalp together, and they put a towel over my head so that my friends could come in and visit and see that I was okay before that they went home for the night. And so we had to wait for them to call the surgeon and to wake him up, that it was late at night and he was already asleep. And so they had to call him in to bring him in for surgery so that he could stitch me back up. And I can remember, the last thing I remember is going into the operating room, and I remember commenting about how cold it was in there. That they kept it really cold, and he told us they do that on purpose. But that was about the last thing that I remember before I got put under for the surgery. The next thing that I remember is waking up in the hospital bed after the surgery. And I remember that it was really hard to come back into consciousness, that I was so groggy and so tired, and it was so comfortable where I was that it was hard to come back into reality again. So that injury completely derailed my basketball season. And although it didn't take me very long to heal physically, that I had lost my conditioning and it was hard for me to get back into the same shape that I was prior. And I did go on and play my baseball season that spring, but there was something that was different. I didn't have the same competitive spirit that I had before. And although I didn't know it at the time, I was focused on more spiritual philosophy and more spiritual things. I didn't know how to connect with others on this at the time, but I had definitely changed. So when I started to read books that interested me more, I can remember finding a series of books called the Medicine Woman series written by Lynn Andrews. And these were books that were about her and her apprenticeship with a medicine woman up in Canada. She would go up and visit Agnes Whistling Elk. And I can remember in one of her stories, she talked about falling off a horse and hitting her head, and that she had to get helped and doctored by Agnes in order to recover. And that it came out in that story that it is possible to hit your head right, and that she had been fortunate that she had hit her head just right in that case. And then I recall when I went to visit Medicine Grizzly Bear for the first time back in 2010, and I recall getting to his house and ringing his doorbell, and he called through the window. He said, "Dr. Anderson, I presume." And that took me by surprise. I wasn't expecting a medicine man to refer to me as Dr. Anderson. And one of the first things that he said to me was, "What did I do to my head?" And that surprised me that I didn't realize that his intuition would pick up on my head injury. And he had told me that he was feeling the head discomfort and that he was getting headaches about 2 days prior to my getting there. And so once he had found out that I had had this serious head injury, we made that the focus of our healing sweat lodge that we had that evening. That we made sure that we prayed for my health and my head, and that we prayed also for my ancestors and all of my family ties, that we could heal all of the trauma within my whole ancestry. And it wasn't until I was in a sweat lodge at Mount Shasta in 2011, and I heard a story from the medicine man about a vision that he had when his grandson was born, and he was holding his grandson as a baby, and his grandson, he said, started to cry. It looked like he was crying, and he was kind of moving, and he'd realized that this wasn't crying, that he was actually singing a song, that his grandson had gifted him a song, and with the song came a vision, and he envisioned that his grandson was a shooting star coming to the planet Earth. When I heard that story from the medicine man, it helped me remember that I had had a vision when I was put under for my surgery for my head injury. And I can recall in this vision that I had that this was before I came to Earth, that I was with my spirit community, and that I was really comfortable, and that I did not want to go back to Earth. But I knew that there was a plan and a mission that was my mission, and that it was time for me to go. And that I can remember that I was there with another spirit friend, and that he left for Earth. And I realized when he left that I was supposed to go first. So that's what got me to go too. And I remember that we were shooting stars and we were racing to planet Earth. And the funny thing about this is we were always classmates and we always knew we had the same birthday. And he was actually born in the same hospital as me 9 minutes before I was born. So with these head injuries, if somebody says that it's possible to hit your head right, what could they possibly mean by that? Well, what I think that could be meant by that is that it's a form of crown chakra activation. And I don't think it necessarily takes fracturing your skull or having a serious head injury to activate your crown chakra, but this is a way to get connected with that spirit energy, with the divine guidance, and to get connected to the higher dimensional knowledge. I know for me, this injury was an important turning point that got me away from being so materially focused and be more spiritually focused and more focused on spiritual development. And that's what got me to pursue all of my outdoor activities and my solo travels and looking for Native American ceremony and sweat lodge, and has gotten me to the point that I am today. So if you like content like this and you want to see more, you can follow us on social media at NeoWolf News. And I'm on Brighteon, BitChute, Rumble, YouTube, as well as Gab, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for tuning in for another episode, and I'll see you again soon.